Hello and welcome to my latest video looking at Henry VII. First of all, I'd like to say a huge thank you. I've had a lovely message from Fran, one of my colleagues, which contained lots and lots of little messages from a lot of our students saying very nice things about my channel and about the videos I've been producing. So I was very touched by that, and thank you very much. I'm also told by some of my students I should give a slight health warning to anybody listening with headphones that the volume tends to leap whenever I change slides. So I'm really sorry about that. Hope it doesn't spoil your enjoyment of the videos. Right, today I'm going to look at Henry VII again, and then we're looking at the final one of the key questions, which is really quite a long-winded question, but the essence of it is we're looking at individuals and groups and then how they're affected by the developments. Now, the main group that's really affected by Henry VII is nobility, so we're going to look at that, and we're going to look at some of the people who are responsible for that. The big other development during this time period is humanism, and we'll look at a couple of the key figures from that as well. So we're going to start with the nobility. So Henry starts with this position in his reign with these overmighty subjects, these noblemen who have lots of wealth, lots of power, whilst the crown, due to the War of the Roses, is essentially broke, and Henry VII's royal authority is fairly limited. Now, we've looked at a lot of this stuff in the earlier videos with the power of the monarchy and with government, but I think it's worth revisiting this because it could be framed as a type of question as a key group, and therefore you might look at it in a slightly different way. Now, Henry had to change things. He couldn't keep this position with the relationship between the crown and nobility as it was, but doing anything about it took a huge risk. Because one thing that Henry could have really struggled with, if there was a major noble-led rebellion against him, things would have been really difficult. These are very powerful, wealthy people with lots of land and supporters. So if Henry upsets them too much, he runs the risk of rebellion, but he wants to make them weaker, reduce their power, and one of the main ways he does this is he hits them financially. Now, according to some historians, about 46 of the 62 noble families were at Henry's financial mercy because of this variety of different acts he brought through. He used acts of attainder, which essentially were accusations of treason in Parliament, and if these were passed against you, you didn't have any kind of chance to defend yourself. It's not like a jury trial, it was just an act of Parliament. He passed 138 of these, 46 were reversed. He did seemingly become more paranoid in the later years of his life, and 51 of these are in 1504 to 1509. So that would be enormously damaging to a nobleman and risk their titles and their land. He issued laws against retaining, and this was passed in 1487, and this was to stop the noblemen holding large groups of men. One of the most famous cases is Lord Bergaveni, who was fined £70,000 for retaining 471 men. This was reduced to a bond of £5,000 a year for 10 years. Shows a bit of clemency from Henry VII, but it does demonstrate the force that he was able to bring down. Now, some noblemen got round this by essentially keeping men off the books and fiddling the way that they recorded things and still maintained their men, but the fact that Henry never faced significant noble challenge suggests that this, to a degree, worked. There was lots of other dues and things that were paid by noblemen that he increased. For example, wardship dues and those over marriage. So the crown was taking £350 from all of this in 1487. It was £6,000 in 1507. So again, this is good accounting. But it's him going after nobility, taking money out of them. He issued bonds. So, for example, the Marquis of Dorset was put on a £10,000 bond because he was suspected to be involved in a similar plot, and essentially, if they did anything wrong, that would be taken. Reconnaissances are really similar. So an example of this, Earl of Westmoreland, the Earl of Northumberland, are placed under this under Bosworth after the Battle of Bosworth. And if they show any sign of disloyalty again, they have to pay the king £10,000. So partly financial and partly keeping people under control. And this doesn't go down well with the nobility, but then they're not really in a huge position to do much about it unless they'd acted collectively, which they don't, and hence my image of the crying nobleman above me, who looks a bit like me. Right. The nobility actually shrank by 25%, as Henry didn't replace noble families that died out, largely taking their land himself. And we can see this illustrated in the positions created. So Edward IV created 9 earls, while Henry only created 3. Edward created 2 viscounts and 13 barons. Henry created 2 viscounts but only 8 barons, and only 3 of these 8 were generally kind of genuine new peerages with land grants. So Henry is not replenishing the nobility, so it's falling in size, which is making it more manageable, more easy for him to keep control of. He also has a tendency to move nobles away from their power base. The Earl of Surrey, who was moved north as part of his attainder, is a good example of this. So the Earl of Surrey's position in the north is completely dependent on Henry, and he doesn't have any support of his own, and also it means that he hasn't given that position in charge of the north to any of the northern nobility, who would have a really strong power base which they could use against him. Because remember, he does have problems in the north, most notably the rebellion in Yorkshire. Now, that isn't to say that the power of the nobility is completely eradicated. They remained in powerful positions. They kept many of the positions on the council. They had positions at court. They obviously maintained their position in the House of Lords. So the nobility's power is reduced, but it's reduced from an incredibly high level down to something which the king could manage. And he did financially go after them, and there is some resentment about this, and this comes out in the reign of Henry VIII. Right, one of the key figures in doing all of this is John Morton. He was a churchman and a lawyer. He was a really passionate Lancastrian, but had worked for the Yorkist Edward IV as Bishop of Ely. Now, he did then oppose Richard III and spent some time in captivity. When Henry takes the throne, he promotes John Morton. He makes him Archbishop of Canterbury in 1486. He then goes on and becomes a cardinal in 1493. He also, as well as playing a really important role in the church, he played a really important role in government, and he was made Lord Chancellor in 1487 and played a key role in restoring the crown finances. Now, when we do Henry VIII, we'll see some characters similar to this who are promoted in both church and state in Cardinal Wolsey and Thomas Cromwell. Now, Morton, and I love this bit about Morton, and I think I've mentioned this in another video, is one of the things he came up with was Morton's fork, and that said, right, if you are a nobleman who is ostentatious, you are showing off your wealth, it is clear that you are really wealthy. You're obviously far too rich, and therefore you can afford to give some money to the king. However, if you are a nobleman but you are appearing poor and you are not making a big show of your wealth, then that probably shows that you're a miser and you're hiding all your wealth. In which case, if you're just hiding it, it might as well come away from you and go to the king. And that is Morton's fork, because you are stuck whichever way you go. Now, he died in 1500, and he was then, his baton is passed on to some other people who continue going after that nobility. So we can see how this key individual links with our key group. And these 3 guys do as well. These are the 3 men involved in the Council Learned the Law. We've got Reginald Bray, Richard Epsom, and Edmund Dudley. Reginald Bray had been a supporter of Henry since before he was in power and helped him raise a lot of the finances for the Battle of Bosworth. He's made Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, which is a large amount of property belonging to the king, mainly in Lancashire. And he led the Council Learned in Law until his death in 1503. And the Council Learned in Law went relentlessly after every penny it could squeeze legally, or sometimes otherwise, out of the nobility. And a lot of the anger was aimed at these guys rather than Henry VII. But it's always good as a king, if you're trying to keep control of a powerful group, to have some fool guys who take all the blame. So Epsom had been a member of the King's Council since 1494, took over as the head of the Council Learned in Law when Bray died in 1503, but then was executed by Henry VIII in 1510 for doing what Henry VII had told him to do. Similar with Edmund Dudley, key member of the Council Learned in the Law, especially after Bray's death, relentless in seeking money, cut lots of corners, twisted lots of bent several laws, broke probably several of them as well, and is also executed by Henry VIII. Again, it's slightly mind-blowing that people could be punished by one Tudor monarch for having followed the instructions of another. And what it's kind of symbolic of, and it links all the different bits we're talking about so far today together, is the nobility had been put in their place by Henry VII. They weren't hugely happy about it. They couldn't strike at the monarch, but they could strike at the men who they held responsible for doing it. And the nobility will remain in the Tudor period resentful of these upstarts who rise up and have positions of power they don't feel they should have. And Cardinal Wolsey and Thomas Cromwell in the reign of Henry VIII will be good examples. They're going to be our next Edmund Dudleys, as it were. So, another area where we see some key figures are in religion, and these are some people well worth you knowing about. So you've got Erasmus, who's this Dutch scholar, key figure in the humanist movement. He visits England during Henry VII's reign. There's other key scholars that he has sympathy with, like John Skelton, who was one of the tutors of Henry VIII. He publishes this book, Adages, which is about ancient Roman proverbs and making them relevant for the time, encouraging people to live a good life. We've got John Kohler, who's educated at Oxford, and he's starting to reject some Catholic ideas, and so he's quite ahead of his time. He's quite important for this period in showing that there isn't universal acceptance of what the church is doing. And he translated the New Testament, and so in that you can see he's violating the church's kind of Latin-only policy towards the Bible, but because of his position and favour, he was able to kind of evade conviction from that. So the religious figures show us another strand or another group we could be looking at, but very much that links with the religious and ideas key question. The nobility one and the People Council and the links with government and power of the monarchy. So I hope I've given you an idea of some of the key groups and individuals from Henry VII's reign, and we've now covered all of the key questions of Henry VII, which means in the future weeks I will be moving on to Henry VIII. Henry VIII's reign is a lot bigger. There's an awful lot going on, so I might have to break some of the key questions down into multiple videos to stop them being enormously long. Right, thank you very much for watching. Please remember to like, to comment, and please subscribe. I'm watching the numbers climb very, very slowly, but I'd like to get right up there, break the 1,000 mark in the future, which would be absolutely brilliant. So thank you very much for watching, and again, please remember to like, subscribe, and comment. I'll speak to you all again soon.